Good day and welcome to the Gritty Tales Writing Vlog. I am Tyler M Mathis, and today I'm going to be discussing a topic that is very dear to me, and that is short fiction. Now, if you ask any prospective newbie author what they're working on, what they're planning to break in with, chances are it's a novel. And in extreme cases, we're talking the most obtuse and overconfident sort of writer. It's an epic. I can tell you right now, if you're working on an epic and you're a new author, just you don't have a chance. Trust me, I tried it. So the new author is working on a novel, and when they're done, they're going to be looking for publishers or agents who are interested in their story. Now, there might be any number of interested publishers or agents. That's what publishers and agents do in theory, or at least in theory. They publish or push fiction that they think is going to sell. But chances are, Mr. Aspiring Author, that these publishers and agents are not going to be interested in your novel. Why? Because you don't have any publishing credits, and therefore you have no credibility in the industry. So the frustrated newbie is inevitably going to ask, well, how can I have publishing credits if no one will publish my novel? And the answer, of course, is short fiction. From the very beginning of mass market book publishing, short stories have been the cornerstone of writing careers. Do you think that a nobody like Stephen King would have gotten Carrie published if he'd had no publishing credits? It might have happened, sure, but his odds would have been astronomical. And if Carrie had failed him, the pressures of everyday life, coupled with his lack of success in getting Carrie published, might have doomed his career before it even truly started. But King was smart. He started small, submitted stories, and had many published in minor periodicals and porno magazines of the day. And for those of you too young to remember, the titty mags featured short fiction, usually pretty pulpy stuff, all the way up to the internet era. Playboy, I believe, still publishes short fiction, but last I checked, they only accepted stories from authors represented by agents. So generally, they're looking for heavy hitters. Not guys like me, or most likely you if you're watching this. But anyway, King had enough publishing credits in short fiction to prove to editors at a publishing house that he knew what he was doing. Those credits got his foot in the door. And some editor thought Carrie was great. They offered him a massive, fat publishing contract, and the rest is history. Now, Stephen King is no isolated example. He is the rule, not the exception. If you look back at history's great novelists, both in literature and genre fiction, nearly all produced memorable short stories as well, both when they were coming up in the industry and during the prime of their careers. Another quick example is J.D. Salinger, who is remembered just as much for his anthology 9 Stories as for Catcher in the Rye. The list of legends who worked in short fiction goes on, and it continues to this day. I am a fine example of a career jump-started with publishing credits in short fiction. Now, by no means am I on the same level in terms of achieved success and earning power as the legends mentioned above. But I have enough clout to write for a living, while other writers only have their spare time available because they're too busy working a shitty job they hate to make ends meet. 99% of my writing income is generated by ghostwriting and developmental editing. Unfortunately, this cuts into my personal writing time and limits the number of stories I produce under my own name. But at the end of the day, I'm a working writer who does what he's great at day in and day out. I work for myself. I don't punch a clock. I don't have any asshole boss breathing down my neck, people looking over my shoulder. I work at my own pace. It's not too bad. Now I ghosted my first novel for something like 3 cents a word. Not a great rate. But that book, at 3 cents a word, earned me more money than all of my self-published sales to date. And these days, I ghostwrite novels for a hell of a lot more than 3 cents a word. I established myself as a freelance writer through my publishing credits in short fiction. I mean, they are the foundation of my career. And if you want to get that novel you're working on published one day, or if you'd like to break into freelance writing as I did and make some decent money doing what you're great at, then I highly recommend getting some short stories published. So why don't more writers these days produce short fiction? I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of authors are looking to just self-publish the book. They're not even going to shop it around. I mean, if that's the case, if you're writing a novel and you just plan on self-publishing, you have no credits, anything like that, whatever, this really doesn't apply to you. But for those who are looking to get into traditional publishing and the writing industry in general, they make a lot of excuses for not writing short fiction. And I was the same way. I was that obtuse, overweening idiot who thought he could get a fantasy epic published right out of the gate because I knew jack shit about the publishing industry, and it was at the beginning of the internet age, and there weren't a lot of sources available on how to do it. The writing industry was just this esoteric, arcane knowledge that people on the outside just didn't really have. Now, I don't regret writing that massive epic because during the course of its 330,000 words, I learned the foundations of writing fiction. But bottom line, it was the wrong course of action, and if I'd done a lot more research, as painstaking as it was to do back then, I would have realized that short fiction is the way to go for a new author. Yet, even after I realized that, I remained resistant to writing short fiction. And I used the same excuse as a lot of other authors. I envision stories on a grand scale. It's huge, vast. I don't think small. To compress my vision down to a few thousand words is degrading. Right. There are myriad other excuses authors use to dodge short fiction. Where's the payday, for example? Which is always a good question. Because a lot of short fiction outlets, which these days are mostly e-zines, I mean, there are still some print publications, but mostly e-zines. They offer either no payment or just a token payment of a few dollars. If it's a print periodical, maybe you get a free copy. So basically all you're earning is a little token award and a publishing credit, which granted is very unfair. I believe that all writers should be paid fairly for their work. But unfortunately, that's the nature of the business at the Bush League level. The e-zines just don't have the readership for advertisers to be interested in them, and without advertising funds or some sort of financial backing, they can't afford to pay authors. But the stories they publish are editor chosen. keep that in mind, because that goes a long way with agents and the editors at publishing houses. And if you'd like to set up a freelance business on a site like Upwork, as I did, you'll need some sort of writing credentials. Boom. Here are my publishing credits in short fiction. And they got me on board. I've been reaping dividends ever since. So there you go. If you're serious about a writing career, I mean, really, just stop with the excuses already and quit gaffing off the importance of short fiction. Put aside for a while your cookie cutter vampire novel or your Game of Thrones epic knockoff series and invest some time in writing a short story. You need to get some trophies in your resume. Then you return to your novel. With the publishing credits you earn, you put those on that query letter when you send it off to the publisher or to the agent. You'll have a hell of a lot better chance of getting that big one published. So this is definitely worth your while. Short fiction is classified according to word count. For your story to be eligible and considered for the maximum number of markets, it should be standard short story length, which is about 1 to 5,000 words. Most e-zines and print publications generally publish stories in that length range. Stories under 1,000 words are what is called flash fiction, and there is also a substantial market at that flash fiction length. Flash is a great option if you can learn to really compress your vision into a tiny package, because those credits are worth just as much as those for longer stories. So if you're able to, write something thrilling and interesting in a couple of paragraphs, hey, go for it. Now, as story length increases, the number of potential markets decrease markedly. A fair number of publications will accept stories up to 8 or 10,000 words. But once you move past that, you get into what's called novelette length, which is roughly 10 to 20,000 words. Then novellas, the longest form of short fiction, which run 20 to 49,000. 50,000 is considered novel length by most publishers. You're going to have a rough time finding a home for a story over 10,000 words. Print publications, they only have so many pages, and as far as with the online publishers, bandwidth becomes an issue with them running longer stories. So over 10,000 is kind of frowned upon. Nevertheless, never say never when it comes to short fiction. I earned my first publishing credit for a 22,000 word novella titled Stung, which is still available to read for free in the archives of Eclectica online magazine. I provided a link for it below this video if you're interested in checking it out. The story is also in my anthology Gritty Tales, which is linked below. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Gritty Tales at the end, since it's very pertinent to today's conversation. So you can get a novella published. Just keep in mind that your markets dwindle at longer lengths. You really want to try and stay in that sweet spot of 1 to 5,000 words, which are accepted by pretty much nearly every publication. So how do we find short fiction markets? Well, former President George W. Bush might offer you this sage advice. Go on to Google. It's really hard, right? You go on a search engine and you look for short fiction publications in your genre. Now, the results are going to vary by genre, of course. In crime fiction, you'll find 2 or 3 dozen reputable zines and publications, but in, say, vampire horror or romance, which are really hot right now, you're going to find innumerable links. I mean, just tons and tons. Just make sure that you're submitting to publications in the proper genre. Your romance might have strong elements of crime, but if it's a romance novel, or not a novel, a romance story at the core, then you shouldn't submit to a crime publication, or at least until that's your last resort, after all the romance pubs have rejected you. For those who want to take all the guesswork out of it, who are really hell-bent on getting a short published, there are sites like duotrope.com, that's duotrope.com, which is a frequently updated online directory of publishers and agents covering fiction of every length. Membership is $5 a month, and I highly suggest that you subscribe. Sites like this allow you to search for publications by genre, length, payment type. Everything is right there. You can check reports from other authors who have submitted to the publication you're interested in, which are going to reveal details like the publisher's response time and ratios of acceptances to rejections. The response time in particular is very important because a lot of publishers don't want you to submit your stories simultaneously to another publisher. So if they're asking that and you need a quick turnaround and they're not offering it, probably best to stay away from that particular publisher. All of these are very useful tools for a minimal investment that is going to save you time and offer accurate feedback. Lastly, in regard to markets, you need to pay close attention to each publication's length and genre guidelines. A zine with a 5,000 max word count doesn't want your 20,000 word novella, no matter how great a fit you may think it is for that publication. You also need to be prepared to reformat your stories according to the publication's guidelines. Now, most accept standard manuscript format, double-spaced 12-point Times New Roman, but they vary occasionally, particularly in regard to how scene breaks are marked, paragraph indents, spacing, etc. Pay close attention and adjust your format accordingly before you submit your story. Publishers, they're sticklers for what they want. They have their reasons, don't question them, just play ball according to their rules if you want to be considered for their publication. Don't waste their time, but more importantly, don't waste yours with an ill-prepared submission. Short fiction teaches us many things. When you finally do write that novel and go shopping for an agent or publisher, you'll have to find the right ones to pitch to. But see, that won't be a problem, will it? Because you'll already have experience in finding proper markets from submitting short stories. The process for both there's really no difference in the process. And there are no differences in the query process either. The queries you write for your short stories are pretty much the same format as for novels. So you'll have that experience and you'll be able to charge right through the process with fewer headaches and, more importantly, fewer butterflies at saying the wrong things. Because let's face it, when you're starting out, you're sure to screw up your query letters at some point, and it's better to make those mistakes while submitting short stories than for a novel that you've spent years working on. It's all a learning curve. So make your mistakes and take your knocks in the bush leagues before you start querying for your novel in the majors. But really the most important thing, in my opinion anyway, that short fiction teaches us is how to write in a tight, succinct style free of irrelevant words and information. In shorts, you just don't have the luxury of bottomless verbiage. Instead, you have just a few thousand words to tell your tale. And this teaches you to include the essential and cut what is unnecessary to moving the story. That hero or heroine you have nearly unlimited space to describe in a novel has to be summed up in a paragraph. You might not even want to describe that character physically at all unless it's relevant to the story. Being relevant to the story, for example, would be, say, a character who's really tall and gets undone by his extreme height. Something like that. But in shorts, often the characters aren't even physically described. And believe it or not many people really want to read voluminous character descriptions anyway. Most would rather have the basics and flesh out the character in their own heads. It's a similar concept with backstories. In short fiction, they're obviously going to be short. So your 10-page report on your main character's history and how he came to this moment just aren't practical in short fiction. And that's a good lesson as well, because big, long backstories aren't even really welcome by most readers in novels, and at least until we've come to know the character in the present a bit. Then we're going to be more interested in his backstory. But bottom line, brevity is one of the crucial keys to fine writing, and you will only learn to be succinct by writing short fiction. Trust me on this one. Keep your descriptions brief and your plots moving, and it's going to help your writing immeasurably. It's going to give you a substantial advantage over your competition, because never forget that writing is a business. We're all authors, but we're all competitors as well. So you need to learn what you're doing, play to win, and use short fiction to hone your skills. In my first two videos, I didn't plug any of my books. But in this case today, while we're discussing short fiction, I think that it's appropriate. Gritty Tales, 13 stories of crime, mayhem, and terror. This anthology features all of my published short fiction and several other stories that were not published. If you're into crime and splatter horror, I guarantee you that there's at least one story in Gritty Tales that you will not forget. There are also several cross-genre works as well. Among them is a crime/romance titled Goodnight Young Lovers that is my personal favorite among the shorts that I've written. So check it out, go to Amazon and read the first story, Survivor South Pacific, for free in the sample. Costs you nothing. Survivor South Pacific is one of my published short stories, and it's also one of my best. And you'll see in print the embodiment of what I've been preaching for the last half hour or so. Feel free to check out the links to my other work below as well, particularly The Serpent Queen. More short fiction. It's a 30,000 word novella, along with my Amazon author page and the Gritty Tales writing group on Facebook. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. I thank you all for watching. That is all.